For Morrison, the question is that the amendment be agreed to, and I call the honourable member for Fowler.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and thank you for the opportunity to speak on this bill. I think I've shared in this House previously about the importance of education to me, to my family. My mother, my beloved late mother, when we were in refugee camps in Hong Kong, and as she applied for resettlement, she told me, she said she wanted to apply for resettlement in this country called Dai Le, which means Australia back then. And there were two reasons she gave. One was it was an island that was far from conflicts that was happening in Vietnam. The second was that it has the best education system in the world. And so she chose and applied for resettlement here in Australia, and we were very lucky, very lucky to be given that opportunity to be resettled here and rebuild our lives. As we know, education is the key for success, is the passport for the future for many people, young people, for the country, but more so for people of culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds and people that have similar shared backgrounds to myself, who miss the young years of going through proper, the early years of education, and when we get to a country like Australia, we seize the opportunity to learn. So for students from socially and economically disadvantaged electorates like Fowler, the cost of education now is becoming such a big deal, is huge. So that's why since my election I have been calling for the freezing of the HECS indexation, and I do want to acknowledge that the government took steps in this budget to change how indexation is calculated using the Lesser Wage Price Index, the WPI and the Consumer Price Index. As some of my fellow members in the House are aware, I established the Fowler Youth Advisory Committee, or FYAC for short, consisting of youth ranging from age 16 to 24 years in late 2023, giving the youth in my community an opportunity to raise their voice and assist me in shaping policy. Earlier this month, we had a meeting, a quarterly FYAC meeting, and one of the agenda items was again the HECS debt and the increasing cost of the pursuit of higher education. So I asked the FYAC group, what do you and your friends think about the changes to the HELP HECS indexation calculation, and that's being backdated to the 1st of June 2023. It was interesting that out of the 12 FYAC members present, a good half answered along the lines that of, it's good to see, but we're still accumulating debt. Another FYAC member said, wouldn't it be nice if we could revert back to the Gough Whitlam days when education was free? Now, we all know that it probably wasn't totally free, but their concern was primarily on how expensive the degrees were becoming and the indexation that they were expected to pay in the future. So I can appreciate their comments. I suppose we had it easier back then with no upfront costs, but Gough Whitlam days are, of course, now very well behind us. In the past year, as I mentioned, I have relentlessly called on the government to address the spikes in HECS, and I know that some of my crossbench colleagues have done this similarly, and I'm pleased, and we're all pleased to see that the government has taken some sensible steps towards this, address this. But does this do anything to really support students with substantial debts? And so, not only do they face the HECS debt, but I have been door-knocking in my electorate, and I know that many young students are sharing with me the cost of living crisis that are experiencing in particular in Western Sydney, where students have to travel far to study, and they have to also, the cost in transport has increased, and those who have to drive, the cost in petrol have increased, and those who are renting, the cost of rent has also increased. So the poor, these young people who are struggling to study, to get ahead in life so that they can have a proper professional job and build a better future, are struggling with many other cost of living pressures. The findings from the Universities Accord final report prove that there is a lot of work to be done in the education space So hence the government is now putting this bill to implement the recommendations. Deputy Speaker, as well as the indexation, this bill addresses student services and amenities fees, fee-free unit-ready courses and the Commonwealth prac payments. In my Fowler electorate, over 15% of constituents attend university, around 7% are studying for a diploma, and around 22% of students are currently in the high school system. So I understand how important the reform of the higher education system is for the future of the youth in my electorate. The proposed legislative requirement that higher education providers allocate a minimum of 40% of their student services and amenities fee revenue to student-led organisation is a positive approach. For socially and economically disadvantaged students, student-led organisations may be able to offer support measures that allow them to have a more fulfilling tertiary education experience by providing student services support. But what assurances can the government give that this support will be targeted at the most disadvantaged students? What students want is more affordable higher education, but the current cost of living, as I mentioned, is not making the situation any better. A lot of students in Fowler are working part-time jobs while struggling to pay the rent, food, travel and other expenses. Students are now thinking twice and maybe even 3 times as to which degrees to enrol on or whether to bother at all. There's nothing inherently wrong with such consideration, but I fear that we are going to lose a generation of talented artists and creative people with the way things stand. I am disappointed that this bill makes no changes to the Morrison government's job-ready graduates, the JRG package, which used financial manipulation to incentivise students to study in areas of national priority. I don't know whoever made that decision, must be have a crystal ball, which has deterred students from studying arts courses by doubling the cost of their arts degree subjects. So to be frank, this is a death sentence for students who are talented in the arts and humanities, and it condemns them to a choice of a big debt or walking away because they cannot afford it. This is clear discrimination. Arts and humanities students are not less important than those pursuing a STEM degree, and I understand the need to push for STEM. It's very important and it's something that I support, but I think the arts and humanities students are also critical for the cultural growth of Australia. Along with the majority of the members of this House, I studied an arts degree, which enabled me to obtain a career in the creative industry, a writer, journalist, and to where I am today. Arts and humanities degrees create future political leaders and advisors, consultants, journalists, academics, poets, musicians, and the lists are endless. I've called on the government to consider the ramifications of the package on multiple occasions. Before the House today, I asked the government again to make the changes to the JRG package, ideally scrapping it altogether, and I will certainly support it. We cannot simply let this scheme continue to fail not only the generation of students facing this utilitarian discrimination, but Australia as a whole. I acknowledge the government's efforts to establish a new Commonwealth prac payment, the CPP, to support students in teaching, nursing, midwifery and social work during their mandatory placements. 68,000 eligible students can expect $319.50 per week during placement. It may not be much money, but it is still some money that students can use to sustain themselves while undertaking their placements. I also welcome the possibility of increasing the CPP for students to relieve their cost of living tensions while undertaking placements, particularly during the spiking inflation that we are currently experiencing. But what about other allied health fields and sciences? The psychology, veterinary, physiotherapy and podiatry. What provisions are available for them? I have shared in previous speeches that Fowler students in physiotherapy and podiatry feel like they're just being left out. They too must undertake practical placements as part of their course. I think it's a flawed measure to segregate other allied health from accessing this benefit, and the government should consider what constitutes priority areas. I understand that the payments will be means-tested and available only to priority areas, but this may unintentionally cause inequality like the JRG package. The government is essentially cherry-picking courses that they are willing to support. I really urge the government, especially the Labor government, to consider opening the CPP to allied health nurses. These are some of the frontline, I think, workers and people that we need in our community. So I would also like to see the government clearly define how the means test will be applied. Will the means test lead to any inadvertent exclusion of students who are working part-time, for example? Many students from Fowler rely on their part-time jobs to support themselves, as I mentioned earlier, through higher education. And my concern is that they may be excluded under a proposed means test. While this bill is a step forward, I feel that this is not enough to help struggling students who need greater support as they navigate higher education, and we need to get the blueprint right. If arts students and allied health students are disincentivised to study, then this will place even more pressure on universities financially. The Fowler Youth Advisory Committee may not have the expertise or experience to assess all of the factors involved in the funding of higher education, but they do know that if the future offered to those who study arts degree is one of mounting debt and high interest payments, they will and could withdraw from higher education entirely. That is surely not the message that we want to send, or the future that we want our students to aspire to. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.